listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma, and I'm your host, Trish Glose. Craig Camp on the podcast today. He's the general manager at Troon Vineyard in the beautiful Applegate Valley of Southern Oregon. I called Craig a wine nerd at the beginning of this interview, and he didn't get mad at me. In fact, he laughed and said, "It's true. I am a wine nerd." He has devoted the majority of his life to wine and the wine industry. He grew up in an area where wine was not important. He says Pabst beer was important. But a trip overseas in college, he studied abroad in Europe, he got bitten hard by the wine bug. He came back home, worked for a company, direct import wine company for several years, and then off to Italy he went to learn more about wine production. In 2004, he came back to the States, to Oregon. In fact, he took over as president of Anne Amie Vineyards, and he said he really revolutionized winemaking and marketing there. Did the same thing for Cornerstone Cellars in Napa, but Oregon was calling his name. He noticed Troon was up for sale. He came in as general manager and really changed a lot. Cleaned up the business, cleaned up the vineyards. Troon is listed as Biodynamic and Regenerative organic certified. So we talk a lot about what that means and how he's not only trying to change the vineyards and make clean grapes and natural wine, he's also trying to change the culture around winemaking and giving back to Mother Nature and our planet. So we talk about that and why it's so important, and that's their mission. And he really lit up when we started talking about risotto. In fact, Craig says arborio is the Marilyn Monroe of rice. Love it. Here's Craig Camp. Checking out your website, and I mean this in the nicest way, you are a wine nerd.
Yeah. Yes, I am.
I love it.
Guilty as charged.
And again, I mean that and I love wine nerds. I'm a nerd myself. I don't know about wine nerd, but just going through your website, I was like, I just got really, really excited for this interview. So.
Oh, great.
Craig Camp, general manager currently at Troon Vineyard in the beautiful Applegate Valley of Southern Oregon. Welcome.
Thank you. It's very exciting to be here. I know you've been in the area, so you do know how pretty it is here. And I'm looking out of my window now at Grayback Mountain at 7,000 feet with its snow-covered peak. And so there's the Siskiyou Mountains surround us here. It's a beautiful place.
Well, I think it always surprises people how beautiful Southern Oregon is. Yes, I've been here for 2023, it will be 21 years in June. So I've been here for a couple of decades. And I think people just kind of, especially when it comes to wine regions of Oregon, they don't really think about Southern Oregon for the most part, although we're changing that little by little. But I think Southern Oregon surprises people how beautiful it is.
Yes, I mean, of course, Willamette Valley has dominated the fame of Oregon wine, rightfully so, for many decades. So people are more familiar with the rolling hills of the Willamette Valley than the rugged mountains and terrain here in the Applegate Valley. And
it's so funny, Craig, because Troon actually, I guess my love of wine came from this region because I was a reporter at a local TV station and I started doing stories on wineries and climate and just all sorts of different things with local wineries. And Troon was actually, Druid's Fluid was actually one of my first, loves when it comes to red wine. In fact, it was called back then kind of the gateway to red wine, right? So Troon will always have a very special place in my heart.
Well, Troon has an historic place here in wine in Southern Oregon and in Oregon actually, because the name comes from Dick Troon, who planted the farm here with his wife Jinx in 1972. They sold grapes for a while and then started making wine in the late 70s. And the Druid story is always one of the. We're not sure if this is true, but this is what we've been told: is that one vintage, Dick had a red wine that didn't finish fermenting, and so it was left a little sweet. And the neighbors liked it so much he kept making it. But those days are long gone. We took over in 2016,
Yep.
and then Brian and Denise White, the owners, came in 2017, and we immediately transformed the property to biodynamic agriculture and regenerative agriculture,
Yeah.
and to make it only estate bottled wines.
Yes.
So today, Druid's Fluid is a very wine of very serious intention, and it's a blend of the classic Rhone varieties which grow on our property.
Yes, we're going to talk a lot about Troon because what you guys are doing out there is incredible. But I'm happy to say that the Druid's Fluid I remember from long ago is long gone, because now I don't think I could drink it because it's a little too
sweet. Yeah. Yes, the market has changed. In those days, I think that was probably the right way to go, but not anymore.
Yes. And in fact, you hear that story a lot in the Applegate, folks growing grapes in the 70s and then kind of, dabbling in winemaking. And then it's like, poof, winery. I mean, you just hear that story a lot in Southern Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, now it's a very substantial wine industry down here with several hundred wineries that are selling. Like Troon, we sell most of our wine outside of Oregon, and that's new. It used to be a more regional type market, right. And now there are wineries selling nationally and even internationally, because we sell to Canada and other places.
So cool! Congrats on that. Craig Camp, where are you from originally?
Well, I grew up on the border of Illinois and Wisconsin, around dairy farms, and so farming was part of my background. And during college, I spent a semester in Europe, and then part of that time was spent in France. And I felt, well, I should probably taste wine while I'm here. I heard they make wine in France, because it certainly was not part of my growing up, which was, I think, it was pretty much Pabst and Manhattan's.
Well, so I want to talk about this because I saw that on your website. And also your accent is still, it's lingering. You've heard
Wisconsin.
That. You've heard that, right? It's like lingering there. I love it. I love a Wisconsin accent, by the way. You grew up in an area where wine wasn't really important. I mean, not a thing.
I don't remember anybody ever drinking wine when I was growing up. It just wasn't part of the culture. It certainly is now, even in places like Harvard, Illinois, where I grew up. But no, it really was an experience during college. That time I spent in Europe, and I would buy wines in the grocery stores there, and came back feeling incredibly sophisticated. And went to a store to buy some wine and realized I didn't know anything about it, and bought a book, and here I am almost 40 years later.
I mean, you got bitten hard by the bug.
Big time.
Yeah, you did. What did you go to school to study?
Journalism. Actually, my first years out of college were spent at newspapers in the Chicago area.
Well, that makes a lot of sense after looking at your website, because you're also quite the writer. I mean, you write a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. It's evident in some of your blogs, which we'll talk about. So what was the reasoning to go to Italy for that semester? It was Italy, right? Is that where you went?
Well, I started off in Austria. Okay. I went to Italy to work later in life. And it was just a spirit of adventure. A college student to spend all of my time in Illinois, and as I wanted to see the world, and so the university, I went to Illinois State University, and they offered a program of study, so I went there for a semester in the summer, and had a great time.
Yeah. Well, you bought this book on wine. What was it about the wine, the book, I mean, that just really the light bulb seemed to go off for you?
Well, I think it was, you would go to, it was for, having real food that was kind of outside the 50s, 60s American diet, and then being exposed to all these things. And the wine was just served with it as part of the meal. And it was so exciting. I remember we went to this Weinstube outside of Vienna, up in the hills, and they had pictures of wine, and we just had a fabulous time. I loved the whole experience, the food and wine, And then my first, after my time in Austria and Germany, I entered France through Strasbourg, and remember going to a Weinstube there and just getting Edelzwecker, the local blend, a pitcher, and it just struck me. I guess the whole cultural aspect, the history, and just the excitement of flavor, flavorful food, flavorful wines, and I was done for.
Well, yeah. And I think also not probably growing up around it, you weren't really exposed to it. So it was this whole new world of something for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When you come back home, did things change? Like, were you like, I need to pursue wine?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I started with Alexis Bespeloff's Signet Book of Wine, which was one of the few books around at that time, and then started reading everything I could lay my hands on. And then started teaching a course on wine at the local community college, and then got connected through made friends with some people that were in the wine business, and I just went cold turkey into the wine business. We started a company in late '79 in Chicago, importing and distributing Domaine Burgundies, working with Becky Wasserman and people like that.
Wow.
It was totally, we had no money. It was the kind of thing we launched. You could never do it today, but we were at a place where we were the only ones with these kind of wines at that period. So we started off with Burgundies, then expanded the rest of France with Becky Wasserman and Christopher Cannon, and then Neil Empson in Italy for small estates at that time. Then I started going up to the West Coast and finding wineries in California and Oregon, and we built a portfolio for the Midwest. And after I did that for 20 years, my partner wanted to sell. I didn't have money to buy him out. Mm-hmm. So we sold to another company, and I stayed there for 5 years. And when my contract was up, I went and moved to Italy for 3 years.
Yeah. So you're talking about the direct import wine company then, right?
Direct import wine company.
Okay.
Right.
And then they were bought.
No longer exists.
Right. It was bought by Paterno Imports.
Correct. Yes.
I got the feeling reading this on your website that you didn't love that it was bought by this company.
No, it was going to we were a very small, idealistic company working with idealistic people that were very, very inspiring. And then that all of a sudden to be launched into what I would call commercial wine business, where it was more about, as they would say in the trade at the time, moving boxes than the quality of the wine.
Yeah, I
found that a very unrewarding experience. So I guess I needed to go decompress for a few years in Italy before I got refocused.
It's a nice place to decompress. No,
right.
I feel that too. KTVL locally was owned by Freedom Broadcasting for years before Sinclair, massive company, media company, bought it. I don't remember the year. And I felt that too, like just some of the things that Sinclair was making its stations do across the country, it just doesn't sit right with you, right?
Right.
It doesn't feel good. And when the time came that I could get out, I got out. But it takes some time, right?
Yeah, I totally empathize with your position, because it's something you have to go through. It's very difficult after you've built something up for years, and then to see it transformed into something very different than the original vision is a difficult process. So, but at the same time, it was a great learning process, like all of these things are, and you realize I really don't want to have anything to do with that side of the business.
Yeah, that gave me goosebumps. Do you think if you had the money to buy that company way back when, do you think you'd still be with Direct Import Wine Company? Do you ever think about that?
Probably. I mean, at that point in my life, that I'd invested so much time, and I didn't have the vision. I'd spent, a lot of time at wineries, obviously, and with harvests all over the world, and but I guess going through that experience made me realize I really wanted to be on the production side, not the distribution side.
Gotcha.
So
gotcha. Also, I am a strong believer. If people listen to this podcast, they hear me say it all the time. Things happen for a reason. Everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And if that didn't happen, you wouldn't have gone to Italy to study wine production.
Right. Exactly. Yes. So yes, I mean, you have to, it's paying attention to what life is giving you. I think, you have to learn and grow all the time.
For sure. And yeah, and think about those bumps in the road.
Right.
Yes, that it is the road,
It
right?
seems a long time ago now. This is well over 20 years ago. All this happened. So,
But all of these
yeah,
things helped
yeah.
you probably get to where you are today and all of these steps along the way, right? It's the reason why you're at Troon.
Right, right. And I think I'm kind of unique because I've had, vineyard experience and winemaking experience and sales and marketing
Yeah.
experience and general administration experience too. So I kind of had this background over the years that kind of touches the entire range of things you have to do in a small company like Troon. So but I find that exciting. I wouldn't want to do just one thing anyway.
Oh gosh, totally agree. So you go to Italy in 2000, I believe that's what I wrote down, to study wine production. What was so significant about the few years you spent there?
Well, I'd been the people I went with and worked with, I actually knew before I went there because I've been importing their wines. And I wanted to be around Piemonte because there was so much happening in winemaking there. It was like a revolutionary area where you had everything from ultra traditional producers to ultra modern producers, and I was an opportunity over those 3 years to see the complete range of winemaking styles, why those decisions were made, how they grew the fruit and everything. So it was like total immersion in this broad range of not only winemaking styles but varieties with Nebbiolo, Barbera, Dolcetto, Fresa, things like that.
Lovely. And then in 2004, you actually come to Oregon and work
Yes,
at a
yeah.
vineyard in the Willamette, right?
Yeah, I'd been coming to Oregon for wine since the early '80s, and because we represented wines out here, so I was really familiar with the area. And there was a older Oregon winery called Chateau Benoit
Mm-hmm.
that was purchased. And they wanted to transform it. It became Anne Amie, and so that was really my job was to transform from that old winery to the new winery, bring in new staff, do resign, and build up a totally new concept. So I've done that actually 3 times.
Right.
And yeah, that's so I think, and that reflects my kind of broad background. But this project is very different because I feel it's very unique, and it's a once in a career opportunity to do something that matters.
I mean, you somewhat took at Anne Amie Vineyards, you somewhat took this vineyard, this winery, and completely changed the winemaking and the marketing side for them.
Totally, and planted new vineyards up on Chehalem Mountain.
Okay, so walk me through this just a little bit. How does one do that? You walk in, you have this business, right? And it's like, where do you start to completely start changing things?
Well, the problem with agriculture is it's hard to change things quickly.
Right.
Every time you come into a winery, you're going to have old inventory that doesn't represent what you're trying to achieve. But the economics being what they are, you have to find a way to resolve that old inventory problem, and that's the hardest part. I mean, the ideas of how to farm, how to make wine, and market good wine is a different problem than selling that old inventory. So that's the struggle when you take over a new an operation that's been in existence. But then after about 3 or 4 years, again, these things happen slowly. You arrive at the point where I guess I would call it the starting line, where all the old inventory is gone. You've got new staff in. You've got your new winemaking equipment. Vineyards are farmed the way you want, and then you can start moving forward. And we're really at that point now with Troon. I feel that with the 1920 vintage, we crossed the line and really moved into the new era.
So you have to have a lot of patience.
you have to, if you're going to be in farming, you better be a patient person because, you plant grapevines and you don't get fruit for 3 years,
Right.
and really top quality fruit for 7 or 8. So it's not for someone who needs immediate gratification.
And this probably sounds like a totally no shit statement, but the product also has to be really good if you're going to market this. What is inside
Yes.
the bottle has to be incredible.
Yes. I mean, when I first got into wine, there weren't a lot of great wines in the world. It was mostly French. There was starting to emerge out of Italy, and then the West Coast of the United States, and of course Australia and so forth. But now there's great wines made all over the world,
Right.
everywhere. And exceptional wines, and often at very competitive prices. So if you're not making a wine that has some individual character and quality, you can't really compete.
For sure. So at Anne Amie Vineyards, you essentially kind of Mary Poppins this. You come in and you change everything, and then you take off on your magic umbrella to another winery in Napa and do
Right.
the same thing there.
Yeah, Napa Valley, Cornerstone Cellars. It was the proverbial offer you couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
And I guess I was still on an exploratory mission. I spent a lot of time working with Nebbiolo in Italy, and then Pinot Noir, of course, in the Willamette Valley. And the idea of taking on a Cabernet Sauvignon project was enticing, and they had some big plans. And it was an interesting period. I really wanted to get back to Oregon after I'd been down there a few years. I
Really?
missed the culture and the experience. When I was at Anne Amie, I was buying fruit down here. I was buying Syrah and Viognier. So I had my eye on the area, and the idea, I guess it was like I was looking for a totally different experience in Napa. Napa, the fruit is so expensive, it makes it very difficult to really experiment with it, because the risk becomes so high. There's a lot of pressure to conform to kind of the standard commercial style. Well, where here you're able to explore, experiment, and really push the envelope as to what you can make, and unique blends, and different types of sparkling wines, things that would be very difficult to do in Napa. I wanted to get back to that. So when the opportunity came here, I couldn't resist.
Well, sure. And I want to talk about that. But from Willamette to Napa, and I know all varieties are different, but how different are they? For instance, from Pinot to this Cabernet Sauvignon project that you are doing at Cornerstone Cellars, like how different? I mean, do you have to completely like shift your brain?
Right. Yeah. It's a total brain. It's a total shift. It's a total opposite. With Pinot Noir, you have a early ripening, thin-skinned grape with not a lot of tannin, and with Cabernet, you have a late ripening, thick-skinned grape with a lot of tannin. And so, I mean, I think that the experience with Nebbiolo really helped me there in trying to work with tannins and so forth, because that's also a very tannic grape. But the culture is different. The land is so expensive. Everything's it's just a different culture. So it's not only working with different grapes, it's a different culture. So the frustrating part, I think, about Napa and Cabernet was it was so expensive to produce the wines that the wines you were selling were very expensive.
Right.
And I think selling very expensive wine is not a very interesting thing to do.
Well, I mean, I'm in that category of I can't afford expensive wine. So I do look for, I think there's certain bottles where you're like, yes, I am going to spend this much on this bottle of wine. But there should be, in my opinion, affordable wine out there. There is, but it's like you have to make it accessible. If we want to sell wine, you have to make it accessible.
This is our goal. And this is one reason we kept making Druid's Fluid is that gave us a red and a white wine that we could make from the blend any way we wanted in a year to make the best wine possible.
Yeah.
And that way we are able to keep the price down. And to me, that's very important, because I mean, it's not an inexpensive wine. I guess we consider it's about $25 now. Mm-hmm. for most people, that's an expensive wine.
Absolutely.
We sometimes forget that in the industry, where we're around a lot of expensive wines, and you start thinking of $50 and $60 as normal wine. But this is not what the wine market is. For most people, $25 is what they buy for a special occasion. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. And so our goal is to offer as much quality as possible in every price point.
I love that. And there is a difference between cheap and inexpensive.
Right, for sure. Right. If Oregon is not a good place to make cheap wine. You're always, California and Washington will always be able to outgun us, because they're able to make, grow much higher, get much higher yields. They're able to mechanize it. Their weather is more consistent than ours. So there's no way we can compete on that level. So Oregon is going to be focused on quality for money, a ratio. So but it's never going to be cheap.
But I kind of like that about Oregon, to be.
Yes,
right.
I do too.
So you're at Cornerstone Cellars. Is that when you get the call for Troon? Like how did that play out?
Well, I decided that I'd really had enough, and I wanted to get back to Oregon, as did my wife, whose twin sister lives in Oregon. Aww. So we Troon had been for sale for a long time, and the current owner was having trouble selling it. And I kind of looked at it, I guess, as a temporary project to say, well, this will get me back up in Oregon. I'll put this winery together, help them sell it, and then move north. But it didn't take me very long to realize what a special property this was. And so we started working on putting things together even before the Whites came in and purchased it. So when the Whites, Brian and Denise, decided to buy the winery and the vineyard, I agreed to stay on as part of the deal, because I felt it's such a special place, and really like a once in a career project to be able to take a what I think is a premium vineyard site, restore it, and bring in regenerative agriculture and improve the wines it's just a incredibly rewarding project.
So was that your idea then, the biodynamic and regenerative organic side of it? Okay. Okay.
Yes. I felt that you look at a problem. The vineyard had a lot of problems, and you needed a framework to approach those problems. And I had enough experience with biodynamics by then that I knew it would work. So biodynamics, is very complex. There's a lot of parts to it. Some of them work, some of them don't. We just don't know which ones. So we approached it as we went totally into biodynamics and still practice it, and it has produced the desired effects.
Do you think the Whites were intrigued by this vineyard? I mean, how much of Craig Camp were they like, yes, we want in because he's here? Be honest.
Yeah, well, I think that was a part of it. Yeah, there hadn't been a team here, or a beginning of a team, for them to come in and just buy a property would have been, and then try to attract people would have been very difficult.
Right.
And Brian's has been a very successful businessman in Texas. He's a doctor, and he's been involved in a lot of medical projects, and he was very involved in that at that period. So even that he could only spend so much time here at that point.
Right. And so luckily they have you to kind of take the charge, take the lead on all of this. Explain to me biodynamic and regenerative. First let's explain it. Like, what is this? Because this gets tossed around a lot.
Right. Well, let's start with organic.
Okay.
USDA organic. Organic agriculture is the government, which is a legal standard, telling you what you can't do, but it doesn't tell you what you can do. So you cannot use this, you cannot use that, you cannot do that.
Right.
That's organic agriculture. Biodynamic agriculture, there's several aspects to it. It was created. The idea was brought up by Rudolf Steiner in the early 1920s in Germany, and his aspect had a spiritual component to it. That was his his background. He was anthropophagity was his background. And so he had this different spiritual approach to nature that he was trying to integrate in this. But it's really important to understand that period. This was right, in between the wars in Germany, and the culture was just a disaster there after World War One. Millions had died. People were looking for answers. And so a group of farmers were very concerned about these chemicals that were being used after the war, and they asked Steiner to give a series of lectures. So he gave 8 lectures on kind of combining his spiritual philosophy with traditional homeopathic agriculture farming that he'd learned about growing up, and from a homeopath that he worked with. So, but then he died a year later. So Rudolf Steiner, which everybody talks about as biodynamics, he just gave this one series of lectures. And that at the end of that lecture, he said, "Now you have to go out and test these things and see what works." And that's what happened at that point. So a whole group of people now from multiple generations has really transformed biodynamics. So I say there's like two groups in biodynamics. One who really are deeply into the spiritual aspect, and those like us, which I would call practical biodynamic farmers, where we feel that there's science behind why these things work. We're trying to apply science to it. And I look at biodynamics as a proactive probiotic program. Everybody knows probiotics now, it's in all the stores. So most of what we're doing in biodynamics is involved around various types of ferments, composting, fermenting various plants to make sprays, things like that. So with all these ferments, what you're doing then is introducing new microbiology back into the soil. And what we're trying to do through all of our process is to let the natural system work the way nature designed it. Mm-hmm. So we focus first on the soil. If you have a healthy natural soil system, that allows the plant to grow in a natural system too, the way it evolved. So that's our goal, is to simply make all of these systems work naturally. And that's biodynamics. That's really the focus of that, is building these natural systems. And then regenerative. So we were the second winery in the world to become regenerative organic certified. And it's a new certification. Obviously, you have to be organic to even apply. But then regenerative applies across a broad range of things. First of all, of course, on your soils, on your plants, you actually have to not do bad things. You actually have to show you're making things better. So that's the regenerative part. So we have to submit soil samples and show that we are increasing organic matter, that we are increasing carbon sequestration, and so forth. And then so they divide it into pillars. So that's the farm pillar. Then there's the human pillar. And so we had to go through a whole social responsibility training and create groups within our small company to take these trainings to make sure that people knew how to communicate, and that everybody had insurance and they were getting paid fairly and they worked in a fear-free environment and so forth. So that's the social aspect. And the last one we're completing now is animal welfare, because we have sheep and chickens and dogs and things like that as part of our biodynamic farming.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but our goal is that we believe that certifications are a way for us to communicate what we do, to tell the consumer that this is different and this is why it's different. And we have 100 acres here. 100 acres. Our farming here is not going to change the world by itself. We need to get other people to farm the way we are, and we feel by getting these certifications and putting them on our labels and showing people that you can make a viable business on a regenerative farm is important to getting that message out. Rising
tide, right? I mean,
yes, exactly. Yes.
And all of this equals essentially natural wine in the bottle.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problematic term because there's no real definition for it.
Right.
But our winemaker, Nate Wall, is an exceptional winemaker, but believes in minimalist winemaking. So our goal is We work with our director of agriculture, Garrett Long, who has a master's in science from soil science from UC Davis. So even with all this stuff, we're doing, they both have master's degrees. We're both deeply involved in the science of it, and then documenting that right. What we do. So our goal by putting all this work into the vineyard is to have pristine fruit when it comes in, and that's the secret to making natural wine. Is you need this very, very clean fruit, and that's what we're able to achieve in the vineyard. So in the cellar, we don't add yeast, we don't add enzymes, we don't add any of these products. In fact, we have ingredient labeling on all our wines, and the ingredients are estate, biodynamic, organic grapes, and minimum effective sulfites. So we had a small amount of sulfites just prior to bottling, just to give the wine a little stability.
So why go through all of this, the training, the soil sampling, the testing, the submitting, all of these things? Is it to make great wine? Is it to give back to Mother Nature? Is it all of the above?
It's definitely all of the above. I think, our mission is to make great wine, but also to make great wine of a place. So we want that, by farming this way, we want to let the vineyard show through, and the unique character of this piece of earth, and it makes a wine in a certain way. And so by farming this way and making wine this way, we're allowing that to show through.
Well, just in conversations that I've had with winemakers and other folks in the wine business, just really across the state, there are local wineries who are starting bit by bit to do things in the biodynamic category, protecting, giving back to the soil a little bit. And then there's other winemakers out there who are looking at Southern Oregon for certain practices and saying, I want those grapes specifically because of all of these techniques and initiatives that are happening.
Right. And we've been getting a lot of national, even international attention. We just were nominated as an American Winery of the Year by the Wine Enthusiast. And we've been featured in a French viticultural magazine, an Italian viticultural magazine, recently in the South African viticultural magazine. So, we're spreading the word about not only farming, but about Southern Oregon. So that's very much our goal. I believe it's a unique place to make wine because we're transitional. I think transitional areas are interesting places to make wine. So we are cooler and then we're warmer and drier than the Willamette Valley, and cooler and wetter than Napa Valley. So we're in between there, and we get it's a really distinct growing period here because at our altitude and this far north, makes for a more compacted growing season, shorter season. But because our days are so long here in the summer, and there's no fog or anything in the summer, we're able to ripen these varieties fully because we have these very long days of photosynthesis. But then in October, when we're harvesting, the days get extremely short. So, and the nights get very cold.
Yeah.
So that slows down ripening. It brings the sugar accumulation almost to a stop. So we're able to let the grapes hang on the vine and develop flavor and ripen their tannins without the sugars getting too high. So the Applegate gives you natural wines that are naturally high in acid and moderate in alcohol. And that to me is critical. That's the style of wine we want to make. But you have to grow in a place that will naturally give you that.
It was just meant to be.
Yes, it is.
How does that feel? I hate when journalists ask questions. How does it feel? They're bad, but how does it feel for you looking back, all the changes that you've done at Troon? Now you're getting all of this recognition. I mean, it's kind of like a hair flip moment.
Well, it is, yes. I mean, we're all extremely proud of what we've achieved. We have just an amazing team here that is just totally committed to what we're doing. I think that, this is a point that people sometimes miss when we talk about biodynamics and things like this, is that everybody talks about the plants and the soils and things like that, and the changes it makes, but it also changes the people. It changes the culture. when you're deeply involved in this type of project that has meaning, it changes the way everyone feels about their work and how they interact with each other, and creates a different type of company culture.
So true. My last visit out to Troon, I got a little tour. You guys are doing some nerdy things out there with soil.
We're pretty serious nerds here. You should hear some of the conversations.
I mean, I got to see the soil, some of the soils, and the worms and all the nerdy things that you guys are doing out at Troon. But it is so fascinating because it's all, in this like circle of life, right? All of it is done for a reason. There's intent behind all of it, from is it the radishes that you guys plant?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yes. The daikon. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You plant daikon. So we're a no-till. We don't want to till up the soils.
Right.
So we'll plant daikon in between the rows, because the daikon grows 3-4 feet deep if you let it go, and so we cultivate by using radishes, basically, and things like that. So instead of using a disc and a tractor, we grow daikon in there, and then it dies, and then puts that nutrition back into the soil as it decomposes, but it also leaves a hole in the ground for other life to move through.
Fantastic. What are you doing for the ground squirrels? Because those little boogers.
We're a little where we are. If you look around, we have raptor perches everywhere, owl boxes everywhere, and one of the great things about this type of farming is it brings all sorts of wildlife back. So now we didn't see it, but we have all sorts of hawks and eagles and now owls in the owl boxes, and they are their job is to take care of the ground squirrels.
And they do a really good job at it.
They do a good job. Yes.
Yeah. I need an owl box in my backyard for sure.
Yeah.
Those little punks, ground squirrels, are the worst. They're the worst.
Every area has their curse, and the ground squirrels and it's a challenge for us as no-till, because it does, they give us some more homes and things like that. So, but we really don't. I mean, we can't poison animals and things like that. First of all, we don't want to. We're trying to create a natural system. They're part of the natural system. We don't want to eliminate them. We want to just control them, and they're more a threat for us when you first plant. They can kill a vine by eating its roots when you first plant it. But a mature vine, they can't really do too much to.
Okay, well maybe I'll plant some mature vines in my backyard. Get rid of those ground squirrels. Ugh. Do you look back at what Troon looked like when you showed up to what it looks like now, and it's just like.
It's unrecognizable. The only thing that you could tell is the same are the buildings that are here.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, I was going to mention, when you're driving into the Applegate, Troon's not the first, but it's when you like come on that road and you hit that stop sign, or maybe not a stop sign, depending on what direction you're coming from. There it is. Like, there's this beautiful tasting room. That was built years ago, but it's definitely a landmark in the Applegate.
It is a very distinctive kind of a Tuscan style building. So it stands out in the area.
For sure. Have you been writing blogs? Like, I know there's, I guess, articles, for lack of a better term, on your website, things from like, explaining natural wine to the weather, to the water, nerdy stuff, your travels, other news you put on there. Have you been doing that for a long time?
Oh, yes. I think I started writing online around 2000. Mm-hmm. So,
okay.
And then I don't think it was called blogging then. I think it was, so I was one of the first, I guess, wine bloggers.
Nice.
It was even in a trivia. They had a wine trivia game for Master Sommeliers, and so asked, that I was the answer to one of the questions.
No way. That's that's a level of success for me. When you're the answer to a question in like a trivia game, that's a level of success.
Yeah.
Well, speaking about your website, I clicked on something called the risotto lesson. Someone likes risotto.
Yes, I do. That is a remnant of my time in Italy. That's for sure.
Okay.
I was living up in the rice area, and so I got a big indoctrination into risotto. And I actually wrote that originally when I was in Italy. I was writing for a website at the time. There was a message board called egullet.com, which was huge. I mean, it was like, like millions of people. I mean, it's a technology that doesn't even exist anymore. But and I was the Italian wine and food manager for the site, and so I would write about food and wine, and that was one of the articles I wrote at the time.
I want to quote you here. You say, arborio, which is the rice that is used in risotto. Arborio is the Marilyn Monroe of rice, very amply endowed with the outer layer of starch that melts away, but is a little light on the inner hard starch that gives bite each kernel of rice. I love that. That's so good.
20 years ago, 20 years ago, I wrote that. So,
what?
Yeah. I always recommend using carnaroli because it's much harder to overcook, and it's easier to keep al dente, which you want in a true Italian style risotto. It still should have a little bite al dente.
Yeah, exactly. And
I recommend finding carnaroli, and you can find great ones on Amazon if you can't find it.
Well, you actually mentioned in this article, thank you for saying you can actually really overcook risotto, and it's just it turns into mush. It's like oatmeal.
Yeah, it's actually one of the dishes you often get better risotto at home than you do in a restaurant, because it takes a certain amount of time to cook risotto, which makes it tough in a restaurant situation.
Sure.
So they tend to pre-cook it and then finish it. Where at home you can sit there. Actually, it's therapeutic to make risotto. You have to stand there and stir it for the 20 minutes, and you always feel better after stirring risotto for 20 minutes.
I think there's a chef who said there's like an old Italian saying, you don't have to salt your risotto because the sweat from your brow will season it.
That's great.
Yeah, super funny. You also suggest broth instead of stock.
Yeah. So usually they'll make it with a very simple bone broth,
right?
Without a lot of other vegetables and things in it, because the thing is, when you're making risotto and you're using a broth, or stock, you're reducing it dramatically, and it's pretty easy to over flavor something. That's why you don't use salt in the broth before you're cooking it, because you're going to reduce that broth down so much it will you'll lose control of the amount of salt in the dish. So you salt separately.
For sure. Risotto is one of my favorite things to make because of that reason, because you have to pay attention to it, right? You can't like stir and then walk away.
Right.
And then you can just you can drink wine while you're making the risotto, which you also suggest.
Yes, I always make that mushroom risotto after our last pick of the season of the harvest every year. We get the team together and have a risotto dinner with drink some old Barolos out of my cellar and celebrate.
I'd love to be there. Thanks. Yeah, I'll show up. I'll show up this year. Well, and especially every time I do a mushroom hunt, I always make risotto with my
Well, that's the thing. It's pretty exciting around Oregon. This area is that there's some pretty fabulous mushrooms to be found.
Oh man, the best. Absolutely the best. So the recipe does exist on your website. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And it is. I just love how detailed you are with it. You suggest certain butters, you suggest certain arborio rice, you have a recipe for the stock. I mean, you just went to town with this risotto.
Well, you did say I was a geek, so there you go.
In a nice way. Risotto geek too. But I did get excited when I was doing my research on you and I see the risotto lesson and I'm just like, what? Click. And I was just like, the angels started on your risotto.
I said I wrote that. It's over 20 years now. And I think I left it in there because it took so much work to keep it in there.
I can imagine your journalism for sure is showing in that article. We're gonna wrap up just a little bit. But being the wine food nerd you are, like me, are you happy, I guess, in this area in Southern Oregon and all the things that it has to offer? Because I always say if Southern Oregon broke off and we started drifting out into the ocean, we would be fine. We would be totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing area. As a kid who grew up in the flatlands of northern Illinois, the mountains and the ocean I never tire of it.
Yeah.
Just got back from a weekend out of Brookings, and it's just amazing area. A couple of hours you're up at Crater Lake in the snow, and
Yep.
drive a couple hours the other way, you're on the coast in the sun, and it's just a fabulous, fabulous place to live. It's an amazing place to grow grapes, which is what brought me here.
Yeah.
And I, if you love the outdoors and natural beauty, it's hard to think of a better place to live. I miss aspects of, San Francisco. We used to have, season tickets to the opera and things like that, but it's a trade-off. You can't do all.
Sure. And you were saying wine enthusiast. I mean, they also recognized this region as one of
the Rogue
best.
Valley was not in his region too. Yeah.
So
I mean, it's very rewarding to see this kind of attention coming to an area that just a few years ago people barely knew existed.
Well, on behalf of wine drinkers and lovers out there, thank you for all of the work that you're doing, not only to, increase the quality of wine, but also help planet Earth a little bit.
Thank you. That is our mission.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious. And I would suggest, if people have not been to Troon, if you're making a trip out to Southern Oregon, you have to go by there, drink the wine, and see all the nerdy stuff you guys are doing, because it's fascinating.
We'll take you on a walk.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Craig Camp, we're going to wrap up and get to the final three. Best advice you've ever been given.
Well, I thought about it. I don't know if it's so much advice is one thing, but being inspired by the way certain people live their lives. I would certainly go back to my father, who was always so open-minded and interested, and never tired of learning new things and going places. But then, for the wine side of things, Becky Wasserman and Burgundy was a huge influence, and how she tasted and how she thought about the farming. And Neil Empson in Italy, Christopher Cannon in Bordeaux, and then in California, Josh Jensen, who unfortunately just passed away this year, from Calera, and people like that. There's this range of people that have inspired me over the years, but not. I don't know if it was like nobody said like one phrase. It was like just the way they lived their lives and thought, and their philosophy was inspiring.
Perfect. I love that answer. What's your happy place?
The vineyard. That's an easy one. There's nothing better than walking through the vineyard.
I love that. And then in all things, I may know this answer. In all things food and drink, what do you crave?
A combination of authenticity and balance. I like things that taste have a unique character, but that there's a harmony to it, that that all the flavors are balanced, and you can experience them all. Not one thing dominates. That there's a elegance and refinement, and whether it's fruit or wine or risotto, or whatever. I like that authenticity and balance.
Balance, so important in all things that we consume. Craig Camp, you have been absolutely delightful. Thank you for sharing your story and your journey to Troon Vineyard. So thankful that you're here in Southern Oregon.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this has been great fun. I can talk about wine and risotto and farming for an unlimited amount of time.
Okay, deal. So next time I come out to Troon, I'm going to bug you, and you're going to sit and have like at least a half a glass of wine with me, or a full one.
You twist my arm.
Craig Camp, thank you so much. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma with me, Trish Close. You can watch this podcast and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Just search Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma. You can also listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.